Chapter 9 of Marx's Capital, Volume 1, is the rate of surplus value. Section 1 is the degree of exploitation of labor power. In Chapter 8, we got some definitions for variable capital, which is the human labor, and constant capital, which are the means of production and raw materials. We'll use lowercase letters c and v to refer to these. C for constant, V for variable. Remember our capital circuit, M, C, M prime. So we know that C embodies the production process, so we can expand C to get lowercase c plus V. Money to commodities to money with surplus value becomes money to constant capital plus variable capital to money with surplus value. And I understand this is all going to be somewhat hard to follow if you're just listening. Certainly this makes more sense written out. But the point is that the value you get from the production process is the total value produced by the means of production and the worker. But since we're paying for labor power at less than its use value, we get a surplus. So what all goes into M prime is constant capital plus variable capital plus surplus value. So let's say I've already purchased a machine that contributes $50 to the value of a commodity. Because I've already paid for the machine, the $50 it imparts onto the commodity does not represent profit for me. As we discussed in the last chapter, the total value of the means of production are distributed evenly among the commodities it produces. There is no human labor power being invoked here, so I do not make a profit off of what a machine I buy does. So if the machine contributes $50 to the value of a commodity, and a worker that I've hired contributes another $20, but I only pay the worker $10, I've made a $10 profit. So this production process created the $50 from the machine, which again doesn't represent a profit for me, the $20 for the value of the labor, and then the $10 which I get for the surplus value for selling the commodity for more than it cost me to make. Keep in mind that the constant capital does not produce a surplus. It simply transfers its value from one form to another. Raw materials are transformed, and the machine takes on wear and tear. The value of raw materials is increased at the expense of the machine. The surplus value comes from the human labor, which, again, gives the capitalist its worth and use value, despite the capitalist only paying for its exchange value. So the surplus arises from the variable capital. So if we're just interested in the capital advanced, since we know that the constant capital isn't going to be producing a surplus, we can set it equal to 0 and just state that the value produced is V plus S, variable capital plus surplus value. And I can't stress this point enough. Let's say there's no worker involved in the production process. The capital buys a machine, the machine produces commodities, and the capitalist sells those commodities. We're just assuming fully automated. The capitalist will not make a profit, because the value of the machine is evenly divided among the value of the commodities it produces. The capitalist will break even after they've sold all those commodities, assuming that he sells the commodities for the same value he bought the machine for. If the capitalist could sell the commodities for more than the value of the machine, then there would be no incentive to sell machines, because machines would themselves be sources of value. Remember, from Chapter 1, Section 1, human labor is the source of value. Machines do not create value. They may transfer their value to another commodity, but they do not produce value by themselves. So, having the variable capital, what you pay the workers, and the surplus value, the profit you make off the production process, you have this concept called the rate of surplus value, which is simply S over V, the surplus divided by the variable capital, or your profit divided by how much you pay the workers. If I pay a worker $10 to make me a $20 commodity, the surplus is $10, and the variable capital is $10 because I paid the worker $10. So the rate of surplus value is 10 divided by 10, or 100%. I've made as much profit as I've paid in labor costs. If you remember from Chapter 7, Section 2, we can divide the working day into two components. One, where the worker produces enough value to match what they were paid by the capitalist, and the other, where the worker continues to produce, for the capitalist, a surplus value. Here, Marx refers to these two segments of the day as the necessary labor and the surplus labor. Just as you can think of the value of objectified human labor, you can think of the surplus value as the result of surplus labor. An obvious mathematical result is that the ratio of surplus value to variable capital is equal to the ratio of surplus labor to necessary labor. They're saying the same thing in different ways. This ratio is a good representation of the exploitation of the worker by the capitalist. Marx clarifies that the rate of surplus value is not the same thing as the rate of profit, because the capitalist has to take into account for the cost of the constant capital, i.e. the raw materials and means of production, when evaluating their profit. The rate of profit is given by the surplus value divided by both the constant and variable capital costs, whereas the rate of exploitation is just surplus value divided by variable capital costs. Marx will deal a lot more with the rate of profit in Volume 3 of Capital. And then for the rest of this chapter, Marx just gives a couple examples to help illustrate the points further.